June 19, 2021, 9:47 p.m., Lake Tahoe, California. The 911 dispatcher's voice is steady, professional, but what she's hearing on the other end of the line isn't words, it's gasping, desperate, wet, struggling breaths. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? Ma'am, are you injured?" More gasping, the sound of someone drowning in their own blood. The call is traced to 4445 Muletail Drive, a $4.2 million estate overlooking the crystal waters of Lake Tahoe. When paramedics arrive 8 minutes later, they find 68-year-old Wendy Wood collapsed on her bathroom floor, surrounded by a pool of blood spreading across white marble tile. She's been shot twice in the head, but somehow impossibly she's still breathing. In the living room, her husband, 73-year-old Gary Spohr, isn't as lucky. He's slumped on the leather couch, the TV still playing, a single gunshot wound to the back of his skull. He died instantly, never knowing what hit him. There's no forced entry, nothing stolen, no evidence of a robbery gone wrong. Just two wealthy retirees, executed in their own home. And the surveillance footage shows something chilling. Hours before the shooting, a masked figure slipped through their garage door and disappeared inside the house. Someone who knew exactly where to hide, someone who waited in the darkness like a coiled snake. But here's the twist that will shatter this family forever. The man police would eventually charge with these murders wasn't a stranger. He was family, a former Major League Baseball pitcher who'd played in front of 40,000 screaming fans, a man who'd earned millions, a father of 4, and according to prosecutors, a killer who'd been planning this execution for years. And this is the story of how a perfect day on the lake became a family's worst nightmare. This 4-year journey from crime to conviction has twists you won't believe, and cases like this only get solved when people refuse to forget. I'll wait. To understand what happened on that June night, we need to understand Gary and Wendy, because this wasn't just another murder case. This was the unraveling of the American dream. Gary Spohr was a self-made millionaire. Born in 1948, he grew up middle class in Northern California, worked his way through college, and built a real estate empire from nothing. By the time he met Wendy in the early 1980s, he was already successful. But Wendy was his match in every way. Wendy Wood was sharp, business savvy, and didn't need Gary's money. She had her own. Together they became one of those power couples you see in glossy real estate magazines. They flipped properties across California and Nevada, turning modest homes into luxury estates. By 2021, their combined net worth was estimated at over $20 million. But more than money, they had family. 2 daughters, Megan and Erin. Megan was the eldest, stable, successful. She built her own life and maintained healthy boundaries with her parents. Erin was different. Born in 1987, Erin grew up in privilege, but always seemed to be searching for something. She was beautiful, headstrong, and passionate about horses. By her teenage years, she was competing in equestrian events. Her parents supported it fully, buying her horses, paying for trainers, funding her dreams. But in 2006, when Erin was just 19 years old, everything changed. She met Daniel Serafini. Daniel Vincent Serafini was born on January 25, 1974 in San Francisco. And for a while he was living the dream. In 1992 he was drafted in the first round, pick number 26 by the Minnesota Twins. First round draft picks are the golden boys of baseball. They're the ones scouts whisper about, the ones who get 6-figure signing bonuses while their high school classmates are still figuring out college. Daniel was supposed to be the next big thing. He made his major league debut with the Twins in 1996, and over the next 11 years he bounced around the league. Minnesota, Chicago Cubs, San Diego Padres, Pittsburgh Pirates, Cincinnati Reds, Colorado Rockies. But here's the thing about baseball. It's brutal. You can be a first-round pick and still end up a journeyman, a guy who never quite lives up to the hype. Daniel's career stats: a 4.66 ERA, 13 wins, 21 losses, respectable for a backup pitcher but nowhere near star status. Still, he made decent money. Over his 7-year MLB career he earned approximately $3.8 million, not generational wealth but enough to live comfortably for life if managed wisely. Daniel didn't manage it wisely. In 2007 his career took a major hit. He was suspended for 50 games after testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs. The suspension tarnished his reputation. He tried to keep playing, heading to Japan to pitch in their professional league. But by 2011 his playing days were done. By then he'd already moved on to the next chapter of his life, or more accurately, the The next woman. In 2006, Daniel was still married to his first wife. They had 2 young children. Life looked stable from the outside. That's when Gary Spohr entered the picture. Gary was hired to train the family's horses. She was 19. Daniel was 31, 12 years older, married, a father. But according to Gary, their relationship back then was strictly professional. 4 years later, in 2010, that changed. Daniel was going through a divorce. The end of his first marriage was messy and expensive. His ex-wife would eventually walk away with a significant portion of his baseball earnings. A mutual friend told Gary that Daniel was asking about her. Would she be interested in reconnecting? At the time, Gary was living in San Jose, studying to become a dental hygienist. She was 23, single, and intrigued. She agreed to fly to Reno for a date. According to Gary, the chemistry was instant. Daniel was charming, confident, worldly. He'd traveled the world playing baseball. He had stories, and he was attentive in a way that made her feel special. They started dating long distance. Within months, Gary made a decision that would fracture her relationship with her parents forever. She dropped out of dental school and moved to Reno to be with Daniel full-time. Gary and Wendy were furious. Here's what you need to understand about Gary and Wendy. They loved their daughters fiercely, but that love came with expectations. They'd paid for Gary's education. They'd supported her equestrian dreams. They'd given her opportunities most people never get. And now she was throwing it all away for a divorced, aging baseball player with 2 kids and a tarnished reputation? They didn't just disapprove. They threatened legal action. According to court documents, Gary and Wendy considered suing Daniel to recoup the tuition money they'd spent on Gary's dental hygiene program, money they felt was wasted when she dropped out. The lawsuit never materialized, but the damage was done. Daniel felt disrespected, insulted. He'd been a professional athlete. He'd earned millions. And now his girlfriend's parents were treating him like some gold-digging loser. But he swallowed his pride, because in 2011, he and Gary got married anyway. The wedding was small, intimate, a barefoot beach ceremony in Hawaii, just the 2 of them and the sound of waves. Gary's parents didn't attend. After the wedding, there was a brief thaw in the relationship. Gary and Wendy didn't want to lose their daughter forever, so they reached out, made peace, started rebuilding. But Wendy had one condition. She wanted Daniel to sign a post-nuptial agreement. Gary and Wendy had established multi-million-dollar trust funds for both their daughters. The money was meant to provide for Gary and Megan for life. But Wendy was terrified that if Gary and Daniel ever divorced, Daniel would walk away with half of Gary's inheritance. The post-nup was ironclad. If the marriage ended, Daniel would get nothing from the trust, 0. Daniel signed it. But behind closed doors he was seething. Friends later told investigators that Daniel would rant about his in-laws. He called them controlling, manipulative, rich pieces of shit who think they can buy people. One friend recalled Daniel saying verbatim, "I'd pay $20,000 to have them killed." This was in 2011, 10 years before the murders. But here's the complicated part. Despite the tension, despite the resentment, Gary and Daniel kept taking money from her parents. Lots of money. Where are you watching from? Comment your location. Gary and Wendy's story connects us across continents. All of us who believe family should mean safety, not betrayal. All of us who understand that money can't buy peace. Drop your location in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. Over the next decade, Gary and Wendy gave Gary and Daniel hundreds of thousands of dollars. They bought them homes, paid for cars, covered the costs of multiple rounds of IVF treatments when Gary struggled to get pregnant. They paid private school tuition for Daniel's kids from his first marriage. They funded family vacations to Hawaii, Mexico, the Caribbean. In 2016 alone, they gave Gary and Daniel $1.3 million in cash to purchase property in Reno for Gary's equestrian center. But the money came with strings. Gary and Wendy dictated how it could be spent. They wanted updates, receipts, proof that their money was being used appropriately. And whenever Gary or Daniel pushed back, Gary and Wendy would pull away, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. It was a toxic cycle. Money, control, resentment, silence, reconciliation, repeat. By 2016, Daniel's patience was wearing thin. After one particularly heated argument about the $1.3 million property deal, Daniel sent an email to Gary that would later be used as evidence in court. The email read, "Take the thing house, but if Gary ever says F you to me again, I will knock him the fuck out." This is his final warning. Final warning. Let that sink in. And it didn't stop there. In 2021, just weeks before the murders, Daniel sent another message, this one to a friend. I'm going to kill those motherfuckers one day. But despite the threats, despite the fury, the money kept flowing. Just weeks before the Lake Tahoe shooting, Wendy wrote Daniel a check for $70,000 so he could buy his dream car. $70,000. Who gives someone they fear? It's one of the most haunting contradictions of this case. Let's go back to June 19, 2021. It's a gorgeous Saturday, the kind of day Lake Tahoe is famous for. Cloudless blue skies, the water so clear you can see 20 feet down. Gary and Wendy invited their daughter, Erin, her husband Daniel, and their 2 young grandsons to spend the day on their boat. By all accounts, it was a perfect day. They cruised around the lake. The boys splashed in the water. Everyone was laughing, relaxed. When they got back to the house around 5 p.m., Gary fired up the grill and cooked dinner for the family. Burgers, hot dogs, corn on the cob, classic summer fare. After dinner, around 7:45 p.m., Erin packed up her 2 sons and got ready to head back to Reno. About an hour's drive. Before she left, Wendy pulled her aside. She handed Erin a check, $9,000. For your indoor riding ring, Wendy said with a smile. Erin had been dreaming about building an indoor equestrian arena at her training center for years. This was Wendy's way of saying, I believe in you, I support your dream. They hugged. The boys waved goodbye from the back seat of the SUV. Erin pulled out of the driveway at 7:52 p.m. She had no idea it would be the last time she'd see her father alive. If the thought of that final hug, Wendy handing over that check, believing she had years ahead with her daughter, breaks your heart, hit like, it pushes this story to others who care. One click ensures Gary and Wendy aren't forgotten by the algorithm. One click keeps their story alive. At 6:42 p.m., more than an hour before Erin left with the boys, a tan Subaru pulled up near Gary and Wendy's property. Surveillance cameras from a neighbor's home captured the footage. The Subaru parked on the street, then about 10 minutes later it moved, parked again in a different spot, then moved again. Whoever was driving was waiting for something. At 6:47 p.m., a figure appeared on Gary and Wendy's security camera. Male, average height, wearing a dark hoodie, gloves and a mask. He approached the garage and slipped inside through a side door that investigators later determined had been left unlocked. Once inside, the figure disappeared. For the next 3 hours, while Gary grilled burgers, while the family laughed and ate, while Erin hugged her mother goodbye, that masked figure was hiding somewhere in the house, waiting. Detectives would later theorize he was in a closet under the staircase, a small cramped space that offered a clear sightline to the living room. At 9:30 p.m., Gary and Wendy settled onto their couch to watch TV. Just a quiet Saturday night, the kind they'd had 1,000 times before. That's when he made his move. The intruder stepped out of his hiding spot, raised a handgun fitted with a homemade silencer and fired. Gary was shot once in the back of the head. He died instantly, slumping forward on the couch. Wendy turned at the sound. A muffled pop, like a book dropping. She saw the gun. The intruder fired twice. Both bullets struck Wendy in the head. She collapsed, blood pouring against the floor. But somehow, impossibly, she was still conscious. She crawled, inches at a time, across the living room, into the hallway, into the bathroom. She reached for her phone and dialed 911. She couldn't speak, but she stayed on the line, gasping until help arrived. Meanwhile, the masked figure walked calmly out of the house, climbed into the waiting tan Subaru, and drove away. The entire attack lasted less than 2 minutes. When paramedics arrived, they found Wendy barely clinging to life. She was airlifted to Reno Regional Medical Center in Reno, where surgeons worked through the night to save her. She'd been shot twice in the head. One bullet grazed her skull, the other lodged deep in her brain. But against all odds, Wendy Wood survived. For the next month she remained in intensive care, then months of rehabilitation. She had to relearn everything: how to walk, how to talk, how to feed herself. And through it all she had one message for investigators. It was Daniel. From the very beginning, Wendy believed her son-in-law was behind the attack, but proving it, that would take years. The crime scene offered few clues, no fingerprints, no DNA. The shooter had been careful. Detectives interviewed the family. Erin and Daniel were questioned separately. Erin was cooperative, devastated. She'd lost her father and nearly lost her mother. Daniel was calm, almost too calm. He expressed sympathy but offered little useful information. Investigators pulled his phone record. That's when they noticed something odd. On June 19, 2021, the day of the murders, Daniel's phone was turned off all day. That was unusual. Daniel typically sent 80 to 100 text messages per day. He was constantly on his phone. But on the day his in-laws were shot, his phone went dark. Coincidence? Detectives didn't think so, but without physical evidence, the case stalled. For 2 years the investigation went cold. Gary's murder remained unsolved, and Wendy, still recovering, still traumatized, lived in fear that whoever killed her husband would come back to finish the job. In 2023, unable to cope with the physical pain, the emotional trauma and the unbearable grief of losing Gary, Wendy Wood took her own life. She was 70 years old. This betrayal, a former Major League Baseball player, hiding in plain sight, living off his in-laws' generosity while allegedly plotting their deaths, is why these stories must be told. Share this video. Someone you know might have information about an unsolved case. Your share could be the difference between justice and silence. In June 2023, exactly 2 years after the murders, Aaron's sister Megan made a bold move. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit against both Aaron and Daniel, publicly accusing them of involvement in their parents' deaths. The lawsuit didn't mince words. It alleged that Daniel Serafini had planned and executed the murders, and that Aaron had either participated or knowingly helped cover it up. The lawsuit made headlines across Nevada and California, and it lit a fire under investigators. Within months, detectives secured search warrants for Aaron and Daniel's home, their phones, their computers, everything. And that's when the case cracked wide open, because while Daniel had turned his phone off, someone else hadn't. Samantha Scott. Samantha was a 35-year-old woman who'd become close friends with Aaron around 20. She took riding lessons at Aaron's equestrian center. She helped out with the horses. She babysat Aaron and Daniel's kids. And according to phone records, Samantha was with Daniel the day before the murder. On June 18, 2021, Samantha checked into the Red Lion Hotel in Elko, Nevada, a small town about 300 miles east of Lake Tahoe. Surveillance footage from the hotel showed Samantha at the front desk, paying cash for a room with a hot tub. And she wasn't alone. Daniel Serafini was with her. When detectives brought Samantha in for questioning, she initially stuck to a simple story. Yes, she'd been in Elko with Daniel, but she'd dropped him off at his trailer in Crescent Valley the next morning, and that was the last she saw of him. But her phone data told a different story. On June 19, Samantha's phone pinged in Crescent Valley, then Reno. Then it crossed into California, pinging near Truckee just outside Lake Tahoe. Her phone was in the exact area where Gary and Wendy were murdered, and the surveillance footage from neighbors confirmed it. A tan Subaru matching Samantha's car was seen near the Spohr residence, moving multiple times between 6:42 p.m. and 9:22 p.m. At 9:22 p.m., minutes after the shots were fired, the Subaru drove away. Confronted with this evidence, Samantha's story began to change. In January 2024, Samantha Scott admitted the truth. Yes, she drove Daniel to Lake Tahoe that day, but she insisted she thought they were there to pick up a package. She claimed Daniel told her he was meeting someone to buy cocaine, even though earlier that same day she'd watched him test fire a handgun fitted with a PVC pipe he'd rigged as a makeshift silencer. Cocaine. Sure. According to Samantha's testimony, she dropped Daniel off near the house and waited in the car for 5 hours, while Daniel hid inside his in-laws' home waiting for them to come back from their day on the lake with his wife and kids. Samantha sat in her Subaru. She claimed she had no idea what he was planning. Then at 9:22 p.m. Daniel emerged from the house, climbed into the car and said drive. As they crossed back into Nevada, Samantha says Daniel disassembled the gun piece by piece, tossing the parts out the window along with his clothes, gloves and a backpack. None of those items were ever recovered. About 5 months later, Samantha and Daniel's relationship turned romantic. That's when, according to Samantha, Daniel admitted what he'd done. He told her he'd shot Wendy and killed Gary, and he warned her, if she ever told anyone, he'd kill her too. But Samantha didn't go to the police. Instead, she stayed with Daniel. She continued babysitting his and Aaron's children. She even spent time with Wendy during her rehabilitation, sitting by her bedside pretending to care. In 2022, Samantha and Aaron flew to Mexico together for cosmetic surgery paid for by Daniel. It's one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. The woman who helped the killer was also comforting the victim. Finally, in January 2024, Samantha was arrested and charged as an accessory after the fact. She cut a deal with prosecutors, testify against Daniel and receive a reduced sentence. She agreed. And in May 2025, Daniel Serafini went on trial for murder. Justice came 4 years late, but it came. Subscribe for more stories where persistence defeats time, where investigators refuse to give up, where families fight for answers even when the system fails them. What cold case haunts you? Comment below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, hit that like button, share it. Let's make sure Gary and Wendy's story isn't forgotten. You don't want to miss new stories and the truth you deserve to hear. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop asking questions.